Finally, we move on a second goal of my movie, the impact of scope modification on accuracy. A similar test was conducted by someone else, but of course it is interesting to verify it yourself. MDT compared 10x with 50x on the same scope, while I compared 6x and 30x on different ones.
Aim small, miss small.
Logically, the better we see the target, the better we can see the center of the target and aim more accurately to hit the exact center. Moving on to my testing, analyzing the table, we see that the accuracy decreased and in some groups even increased, in some cases quite significantly. Let's figure out why, and this is again GG55 grain which I mentioned earlier, where I showed that 90% of cartridges shoot better with a suppressor, but the GG55 doesn't. In all other tests, they performed average, but here they show surprisingly good results. And let's compare the accuracy of GG55 with the processor, which, as we know, provides the best accuracy, and we see the average results. I shoot from B-pot with a forward pressure to allow free recoil movement when the firing, because if we do the opposite, the rifle will start to jump. And we might think that this caused the dispersion, and the point of impact became oval vertically, as if we were shooting from piston-driven. But after the GG, I shot again with the STS-55, and even from 60-round magazine, on the highest bipod settings and with the two bags under the stock. The 10-round test took not a minute, as with GG55, but only 30 seconds, so the factor of haste of general human error is invalid for these GG55 groups. We can assume that in this particular muzzle brake setup, these cartridges perform better than the others. This makes sense, as even the slight misalignment with a small bore diameter can significantly affect the bullet trajectory. This happens due to the different influence of powdered gases on the bullet, leading to increased dispersion. However, let's compare them with STS-62 cartridges, which were shot immediately after them. The 10-round group of STS showed a result of only 2 MOA, while the similar GG group achieved 1.2 MOA, which seems to confirm this theory, and all groups were shot using the same box of ammo. How does that happen? Most likely I just got lucky with successful groups. For example, you can see them on accuracy graph of 20 groups that I found online. You can see that the graph of 20 groups vibrating. It shows both abnormally accurate and abnormally inaccurate groups, and their delta is about 450%. Statistics tell us that 68% of groups will fall within plus minus 1 standard deviation from the average, and 95% of groups will fall within plus minus 2 standard deviations from the average. So, for example, if your long-term average is 1.5 MOA, then 67% of your groups will be between 1.35 and 1.65 MOA. Similarly, 95% of groups will be between 1.8 and 2 MOA. Anything within this range is perfectly normal for an average of 1.5 MOA. Such is the nature of dispersion. So returning to the comparison between the STS-62 and GG55 with muzzle brake. We can see that the mean radius for both of the groups are the same. This means that the STS-62 has 2 fires, while the main group is relatively small, whereas the GG has no fires and its average square is slightly larger. However, without knowing this type of measurements, someone might assume that the GG performs better than the STS. In all other groups, it is evident that the STS-62 performs significantly better than the GG55, which further proves that it is impossible to accurately assess the precision of certain ammunition types even after firing 1,000 rounds. But to calculate this, you would need to use a computer and Photoshop, combining groups into one and transferring the data into specialized software, which is more complex and harder to understand. So what's the result? By how many percent do I shoot worse with a 6x scope?
The answer to the ultimate question. "42."
The final result is 42 for the muzzle brake. This is more than I expected, and for the suppressor it's even more, 49. If we average this value for both the suppressor and muzzle brake, we got the value of 46. But if we take the mean radius instead of the group radius, the average is actually 61%. And if we take this overall average, which is mean of the different ammo groups, each of average of 2 or more groups of 5 shots, we will get 53%. The group size can be on average 1.5 times larger using a scope with a lower modification in my test. That is significantly exceeding the 15% deviation mentioned in the MDT video. This might be due to the quality of my Chinese dynamic modification block, which may cost 6 times less than the original one. Interestingly, a few months after my accuracy testing, I noticed some wobbling, which I initially fixed by tightening it, but later discovered that the bolts are mounted to a point that the handguard were the wrong factory specification, 2.9 mm instead of 3 mm, causing persistent loasiness. And since I don't know when this wobble first appeared, it raises doubts about the objectivity of my test. Regarding accuracy and the impact of magnification, PRS shooters often use 15x magnification for faster hit analysis and width correction. However, a 6x scope is not suitable for precise and fast shooting. I noticed that with 6x scope you spend twice as much time on aiming, constantly calculating whether you were exactly on a target and making the necessary adjustments. Paradoxically, any increase in modification brings the appearance of so-called tunnels or a shadow effect, and a higher demand for a proper eye positioning. Otherwise, the image goes out of the focus and the shooter has to waste time constantly stabilizing their position. In low modification scope, this effect is almost absent. However, it turns out that with them you need to aim longer to be sure for the most precise targeting. In modern armies, such as in the USA, from 1988 to 2010, snipers used triple scopes with fixed 10x modification. Before that, the modification was even lower. On the other side of the barricades, the PCO-1 on the SVD has only 4x modification, and in the previous sniper system with the Mosin rifle, it was only 2.5x modification. Hunters generally use variable modification of 3 to 9x or 4 to 12x, but very rarely anything higher. The military for a long time didn't set variable modification scopes due to their obvious unreliability because of more complex construction. The main drawback of high modification scopes is their weight. The higher the modification, the larger the objective lens needed, and thus the greater the weight. The second drawback of a larger objective lens is that you need to raise the scope height, which is inconvenient and increases visibility, which is critical if you are a military sniper. As they say, precision shooters want the weapon bigger, longer and thicker. Meanwhile, the military wants lighter and more compact, but with the same characteristic. And a powerful scope is not guaranteed that you will hit the target at all. I have seen a shooter with 30x scope who meets the silhouette target at 100 meters.
Hasta la vista, little kid! Bye-bye! Oh! Bye-bye! Oh! Bye-bye! Oh! Cabrón!
Go a little closer. Yeah, there you go.
Oh! Okay! Hasta la vista! No!
To conclude this section, I will share an interesting fact why MOA market scopes more popular in the USA, while MALMRAT is more common here in Europe. By an incredible coincidence, one MOA is almost equal to 1 inch at 100 yards, so Americans can quickly measure their accuracy or make adjustments just by holding a ruler to their shots, using the target grid, or simply visualizing what an inch looks like. In the rest of the world, the metric system prevails. Unfortunately, 1 rep equals exactly 10 centimeters at our 100 meters. And if your click value is 1/10 mRAD or mil, that's exactly 1 centimeter at 100 meters. So if you're in Ukraine, get a mRAD scope. If you're in the USA, come to Ukraine.